excited today to have the opportunity to speak with someone that I've been hoping to speak with and get as a part of this event for quite some time. Morgan, welcome. Tell us
Thanks,
about who you are and what you do.
thanks, Sam. I'm happy to be a part. My name is Morgan Sheridan. I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones in Barrie, Ontario. I've been with them about 15 years, and I have two 4-year-old girls, twin girls.
Wow. Yes, you've
Mhm.
got a busy professional life and a busy home life as well.
That is very true.
Can you tell us, how does the work that you do specifically help members of the 2S LGBTQIA community start or grow their respective families?
Yeah, so for me, um, I had my girls being part of the LGBTQ community. I had my two girls with my ex through a surrogate. And one of the things I think that surprises many couples when they have a surrogate, when they're starting from scratch, is the cost.
Mhm.
And when you look at what all of the costs are, it's beyond surrogacy, right? It's beyond an egg donor. It's beyond the legal expenses because that is all just upfront costs. When you actually have the baby, you have a parent that's taking parental leave, right? So incomes are reduced. So what I do is I help shape the couple's idea of what their financial picture is going to look like moving forward. Because unlike heterosexual couples, we have to be so invested
Mhm.
financially and emotionally in order to make this happen. And, frequently, costs can run, at least it did for us, 80, $90,000. So where do people get money from there? Do they take
Mhm.
it from their investments? Do they borrow it from a line of credit? What are the best ways to do it? And so one of the ways that I help couples plan for that is to first decide what it is that they want to do and where we should best budget and take that money from. But again, not just for the surrogacy part, for moving beyond. I mean, the first 5 to 7 years of a child's life are incredibly expensive. I mean, yes, the teenage years get more expensive, but when you look at it from an earnings reduction point of view, um, for spouses taking sick days off for their kids and various other things, it's really expensive. So I just like to sit down with people and help them plan for that.
And give them the opportunity to map it out and
Hmm.
look at the numbers, right? I would assume
Yeah,
that with you, when they're looking at numbers with you for the first time, some of those numbers could be shocking.
could be, could be, and I think that it's important to look at all of your resources too. I mean, we typically think of when we think of coming up for a big expense, we think of maybe borrowing the money from a line of credit. Often you might not have enough, but it's you have to look at other unconventional sources too. And one of the biggest things that I have found for couples that have helped is even looking out at family, right? I mean, I helped a couple. This was maybe about 2 years ago. They came in to see me, and they had already been clients with me for a little while, and they said that they wanted to start to plan. So we were working through various different strategies to come up with the money, and then they just started to openly talk to family about it. Right, this is something that they want to do, and one of the partner's moms came up with a forgivable loan for the rest. Now, not everybody can do that, but I
Sure.
think it's just important to look at all of your sources when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Because she obviously wants a grandchild,
You're right.
right?
Well, there
What
there
what
is that.
grandmother? Well, I don't know many grandmothers who wouldn't, if they had the means, wouldn't fork out the money to get a grandchild.
Fair enough. I think that you're probably very right about that. I've met a lot of grandparents in my day.
Yes, yeah. Hmm.
Are there things that you might look for working in the capacity that you do that your clients would argue make you better suited to help them as members of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community that perhaps your cisgendered heterosexual peers may just not even know to look for?
Yeah, I think because I am part of that community, right? I mean, I've gone through just about most of the big life milestones. I'm very open with, I've gone through marriage. My partner and I were married before. We're now divorced. We get along fabulously. We live a block apart. We get along really well. I mean, ours is an unfortunate story, but we've gone through a marriage and a divorce, and I've gone through planning for children, having children, and now being a dad of twin girls with a new partner. So I think of all of those different milestones that I've faced as an LGBTQ person. And I think that really helps other people from all different facets of life, regardless of where they're coming from, because they know that I've gone through most of those things. There are nuances. There are nuances to working with LGBTQ couples and working with someone who is there, because there's just things that are different for us. Again, when you look at something as simple as planning to have a baby, but you look at just the background that people have, right? It's just different. So, for example, maybe you weren't out in high school. Maybe you were too afraid, like me, because you grew up in a small town, and so you didn't want to tell anyone that you were gay. Those things are relatable to many, many people. And it might seem trivial, but those things all help you relate better and understand the person across the table from you. That's why I think it's important for people who are looking for someone who is like-minded with shared experiences, that they should try to work with someone in their community.
Sure. I fully agree. That's the idea behind this event, is that I really think that there's something that comes from that comfort of knowing, okay, they haven't walked my shoes, but they have walked in a pair of shoes of their own that probably are different than many other people.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Yep.
Are there any pearls of wisdom that you've learned over the years that your clients would say make you especially gifted to work with them?
I would say, you know what, I in my 15 years, I would say plan for the best, but prepare for the worst. And I know that that sounds, a little bit of a downer, but I think that's important. And when you're looking at planning for, if we were to just look at, planning for having a baby, there are so many different things that you're going to be challenged with, right? And so we hope that everything goes well, but you've got to make sure that you've got the financial firepower in the back cupboard in case something doesn't. So, for example, you spend 80, $90,000, let's say, on having a child, and then one of you go off on parental leave. Well, what if the other person loses the job? Right? What if something happens, right? There's so many different things. So what I say is, you plan for the very best case scenario, which is, to be honest, in my experience, is often what happens. Usually, the best case scenario is often what happens. But you need to just be mindful of planning for the worst. So that's the financial aspect. But what I would also say is, be sure when you're a couple that is going into having children to be very honest and upfront with what your own expectations are as a couple. Because going into this, we don't have the predefined gender roles that other couples will have, right? So mom isn't staying home and dad is going to work and mom is doing all of the looking after children, right? So who is going to do what? And I think that that is something that's really important, because when you have a child, after you spent all of that money, your resources are a little bit stretched. You just want to make sure that your relationship is on a pretty solid footing as well. And having those conversations and even going to a counselor ahead of time and really just talking about how you're going to work through these things is something that I think is really helpful. Because without those predefined gender roles, it's a benefit. We have the ability to create whatever relationship, family relationship that you want to have. But you have to be thinking actively about who's going to do what. And I have often seen when same-sex couples have children that they struggle with that, right? Because one might have an expectation that the other one is going to do more of the feeding at night, right? And the other one might not. So I think just making sure that you're ready financially, but also emotionally as a couple, because it will be very trying.
Yeah,
It will be very trying.
that's very true. That's very true. You have been there and done that, as it were.
Yeah.
Were there times through the process that you were made to feel that you were the other?
You know what? We worked with a surrogacy lawyer who just focused on LGBTQ couples. So that was very good. Our families were both very, very supportive. They still are. So I never really felt that way. But I did find that there were various times that the paperwork wasn't geared towards a same-sex couple, and there was numerous times where when we were looking at something that it would say, father, mother, and so there was just a little bit of that I said, oh, that's still, a little bit behind the times. But I believe it is becoming a lot more common now.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't say that I've ever been made to feel like the other. Even in the girls' school, they've got a couple of parents in their class who are also same-sex couples. And so I think it is just becoming a lot more open and common now. Um, but that experience could be different for many others for sure.
Absolutely. And you don't live in a big city, so it's good to hear that it's filtering out to the smaller communities too, because I think that we think of it as being better in the big urban centers,
For sure. Yeah.
but less.
I'll tell you, it's interesting because I was born and raised in Barrie, which isn't a large city. It's only about 170,000 people in here. And I've always been out as a financial advisor. I've always been out. And I don't believe that it's ever impacted my career. But the interesting thing is when you get people who come in and sit across from you on the table, they naturally assume that you're a straight white male, right?
Right.
Because it's Barrie, and so they often will ask the question, what does your wife do? And I have to say, well, I don't have a wife. I'm married to a man, or I have a partner. And there's usually a little bit of an aha moment. And I have done that. I cannot tell you hundreds and hundreds of times have I done that, and I've never had anyone turn away knowingly. So I think that I've always felt really supported, but I know that that hasn't been the experience of others, and it depends on where you live.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And I'm glad that, it is in our world, we're constantly coming out. And this is another example of you having to do that. But I'm
yeah.
grateful for you that you haven't had to, that feeling that wasn't okay. And so,
Yes. Not that I know of. I mean, if I did, then they've never they've never said anything. Nor would I want to work with anybody who had an issue with that, anyways, right? I
sure.
mean, I often think, if someone did have an issue, then I wouldn't want to obviously work with them.
No, no,
There's no
there
time
needs to be mutual respect, especially when
for
you're
sure.
dealing with something as sensitive and vulnerable as somebody's finances.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yep.
When you were going through the journey of having your girls, finding your surrogate egg donor, all of the process and becoming parents, would you have, I mean, there wasn't a show like this, but would you have felt that there was a benefit to having a show like this? And if so, what would you have wanted to have seen included in a show like this?
Yeah, I wish that there was, because we had to source out everything right on our own. But one of the things, and this is maybe one of the nuances of being in a smaller community, where it's just where I could see this being helpful, is that at the time, we didn't know any other same-sex couples in our area that had kids.
Right.
Um, and it would have been really helpful for us to connect with others just to understand a little bit more, because I talked about those predefined gender roles and who does what. We had to learn that the hard way,
Sure.
right? We had to learn that the hard way. And it would have just been nice to have just connected with families who were closer and just talk to them and hear what their experience is and have somebody to lean on. And so I think that that's why this is really, really valuable. I mean, you can Google, a same-sex lawyer and things like that, but this is different because you get a chance to at least talk to that person and they just become a little bit more human. So
Yes.
I do think that having a community um, where you can easily connect with other people who are going through it is really valuable. I'm part of there's a large not-for-profit charity in Barrie that that looks after all things LGBTQ that's in our community, and it's a growing organization. And they did try, I would say, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago in the Barrie area to put some sort of community together. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't
Right.
big enough in our community. So that's why I think you need the scale of
Mhm.
looking, into down into Toronto and various other things to get those connections, right? I mean, now I think in Barrie, I mean, there's probably a handful, but there's still not that many, to be honest.
Yeah.
Same-sex couples. I think I know who have kids. I know many of them, but probably not all of them. But there's not hundreds of them, that's for sure.
Right.
Barrie, yeah.
Yeah. And it is, and I think that especially if they've come that way, they're probably not, they're still looking back towards Toronto when they're looking to make connections because they don't know where to start looking within the
Yes.
community. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is becoming more common. I mean, I can remember in university. So I went to Dal, which is in Halifax, and just a couple of years ago, I went there, and I can remember there was a friend of mine who was on my floor in residence, and he had two dads, and he was American. He was from Maine, and that blew my mind at the time, right? That blew my mind. I was like, wow, because I was gay. By that time, I was out. But the
Mhm.
fact that he had two dads, that was incredibly rare, right? I mean, this was going back, over 20 years ago. And I often wish that I had kept in touch with him because it would have been so interesting to see how he is now, right? How he developed and what some of his challenges were, because he was one of those very early people, right? Now it's becoming a little bit more common, but at the time, he probably would have encountered all sorts of prejudice and
Sure.
and, and things too. But yeah, I still remember that. That was fascinating to me.
But it would also, I would think at the time, give you that hope that
Oh, it
you
did.
could be a parent at some point down the road. I mean, as much as
Yes.
you know that intellectually,
Yes.
just to see someone who is a product of that, it gives you that hope, I would think.
Yes. Yep. For sure. It did. It did. Yep. And I think that hopefully as we go along, it's going to become more and more common. The thing that I would love to see is costs going down, because that is maybe too strongly worded, but almost a discriminatory barrier for same-sex couples.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you can, it is so expensive, and there are so many same-sex couples that would make fabulous, fabulous parents, but they never will. That's just the sad truth of it, because it is so expensive. And if they don't have the means to do that, then they won't. And I think that that's unfortunate. I think it's a missed opportunity, right?
Sure. I
Yep.
fully
Even
agree.
adoption. I mean, you look at other things, right? There's costs, right? It's expensive. And in many ways, if there was some sort of way that we could remove that financial barrier, that would just be wonderful, because there's so many great couples out there that would make great parents.
Yeah. I fully agree. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you were hoping we'd spend a few minutes discussing today?
Um, no, I think, I mean, I think I would love to see this show, blossom into, a few of the different things that we talked about, because I do think that it's really valuable for people to explore. I think maybe a nice ecosystem and community of, same-sex couples who are having kids would be helpful. I often think it would be so cool to organize, even something as simple as little organized play dates with LGBTQ couples in different
Mhm.
communities. How do you do that? But how do you connect with people? How do you find them all? So things like that. But no, I think that's good. And obviously, if people have any questions, or if they're wondering about it, or just want to chat about their experiences and what that's going to come up with, then they can reach out to me. With me, having twins, it's slightly even more unique and much harder. So I tell people that if they're considering having twins, just to really consider it, because it is significantly more challenging. But I'm happy to chat about that too. So some of our good friends, they are considering having twins, and I don't know if it's maybe my bad parenting skills or what it is, but we've all hung out a few times with my kids, who are very energetic, and they've decided now not to have twins or having one at a time. And I thought, I don't know if that's a bad thing for me as a parent that after we've hung out, they're not doing it now. But you know, happy to chat with anyone who wants to be a parent.
Perfect. And in light of you saying that, my next question for you was, how do people find you?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So they can, if they Google Morgan Sheridan Edward Jones, that's my contact info there. That's my website. They can reach out to me, and all of my numbers are on there. They can email me. They can give my office a call. They can do all of that. And happy to chat, even just generally. It doesn't have to be about money. It doesn't have to be about anything. If it's just about parenting, if it's just about questions, then I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. And do you have social media? Do you throw your family out there for the world to see, or no?
I do. I don't have a professional one, but I've got my Instagram. My Instagram is it's Morgan Sheridan. So ITS. So it's Morgan Sheridan.
Mhm.
And happy to add anybody on there who wants to see. It's all just pictures of my kids and the random picture of me. But again, if anybody wants to join and see what life is like, then they can. And hopefully it doesn't scare them.
Wonderful. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's truly been enlightening and it's been wonderful.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.